Hello, this is Chris Ott, and this is part 21 of this series that I'm calling What Meher Baba Really Taught. And in part 20, um, I went over my own what I call theory of the evolution of perception, and which I've written a couple of books on, and I'm basically always talking about it. But I explained how this concept when seen laid out schematically, allows us to understand better, or even grok and have an intuitive understanding of um, many of the phrases that Meher Baba said and other mystics have said that seem sort of diaphanous and strange. And so examples were the world is an illusion, we're all one, there's only God. So let's just quickly, I have the same chart up that I used in part 20, and I'm going to do another couple charts to show what I'm going to do today. But just going over it briefly, there was, in the beginning, there is a sort of latent intelligence, okay, which we call infinite intelligence, and that term comes from Baba himself. And then it begins, in the beginning, it's sort of dormant, like asleep. And that this is a psychogenic process. That means it has a psychological origin, or it is a psychological process, not a physical one, that creates the physical world. The physical world, with all the aspects we find in it, like it's law governed and it's stable and things are solid. That's all. We are able to explain all of that in terms of an evolution of what I call perceptual schemas. And these schemas schematize how perception occurs, and this gradually produces up the world. And we went over the first schema was time, of course, and then space. And so first things are temporal, but there's nothing to be temporal. It's just a way of perceiving. And then there's spatial, so now things can be understood in terms of space and time, and that allows the evolution of the natural laws, which are ratios of time and space, and they're numeric. And we gave an example of gravity, which is a primitive natural law that is a necessary condition for the formation of planets and so forth, and atoms and everything. Well, not atoms, but there are other forces like gravity that pull atoms together. But you have to have these natural laws, and then you can explain the entire universe, physical universe, in terms of natural laws, plus measurements and other numbers, and geometry. And we arise, our bodies evolve out of the sort of the dimension that comes from just pure number. And so there is a level in which we are still just really sort of here in terms of number, space and time and geometry. And our locations are relative to one another, and our sizes and so forth. But and our weight and our height and all that, okay, it can all be described in number. However, as our bodies evolve in this number way, they eventually evolve nervous systems and eyes and ears and so forth that allow it to assign sensible qualities to these numbers. So a certain number of hertz of a frequency of vibration in the numeric air is interpreted as a certain pitch. So you get sound, and then the same with all of the aspects, like a certain vibration of electromagnetic radiation, which is numeric. It's purely describable in terms of number. It's interpreted by the eyes, nerves, and brain that you perceive through as colors. And so you get a world that's sort of color and sound, and then you add this smell and taste and so forth, and all the things, pain, and things that are not just the five senses, but all the different kinds of sensations and experiences. And so the world kind of emerges out of this evolution, And I gave the analogy of a computer game, which of course on its disk, when you buy a computer game, it's just binaries, it's just numbers, ones and zeros. But you put it in the console and that will convert it into color and sound and sort of becomes a world. And they actually, when they make these games, they don't just animate them. They actually load in what's called a natural law package, a package of natural laws. So with an object, you shoot an arrow in the game, it's going to fly and curve and land according to the laws of nature that are actually programmed in. That's kind of wild. So it's very much the same idea. And then once you have this, you evolve into a human being, you develop language, and then out of language comes thought, and your mental dialogue and monologue that goes on in your head, and you develop concepts, and out of concepts we have an evolution which is cultural. So we have, art and all the things, and we write novels and all the stuff, and we have ideas of good and evil and heroism and all the things that are in our culture and our myths and everything. That's all evolves, but that evolves in the individual, because these lenses, they're in the individual, but because you're in a community, they're often like mutually shared. So, I mean, the Greeks had the idea that Hercules was a real hero, and they all had it, but they had it because they shared it, even though they experienced it, the understanding individually, and they learned it in their education. It still became a kind of shared lens through which they saw the world. Anyway, this is how the world is formed, out of just an evolution of perception. But when I got done with this, and I was going to go on and think of what I would do for part 21 in this series, I realized looking at this, even though I liked the way video 20 came out a lot, I felt that it still left a lot of questions. So, as I say here, but this still leaves some questions. So what kind of questions am I making? Well, one is like, what's making this happen, And what's making it, and how is, if this is infinite intelligence, and in the beginning it's asleep or unconscious, and it's gradually gaining consciousness through this process in each individual, how does it determine which lens to imagine next and next and next, this series? Because does it just turn out to be a coincidence that it winds up creating this fantastic, very rational world that we live in? Rational in the sense that it all sticks together, not like it's reasonable. It's kind of, we live in kind of an unreasonable world, but it is rationally ordered. And how is that possible? So what makes it know to do time first, space next, gravity next, etc.? Well, I'm going to go into that. And I'm going to go into a couple of things, but this is an important one. And this brings up the subject of cause. What causes it to do this? All right. Now, cause in philosophy is a big, big subject. And I've done not only some videos just on cause, I did a whole series of 11 hour-long talks just on cause, and it's called On Cause, and it's on my main site. And if somebody was watching that, they might think, boy, he's interested in cause. I don't know why. It's sort of boring. But its context of all that comes in right here. This is what all that talk about cause is really about. It's about this. Now, I have to give a quick little lesson on some of the considerations that we have to have when we talk about cause. Now, one of the main people that talked about cause was Aristotle, 2,400 years ago. And Aristotle was very interested in cause also, and he recognized, or he felt that he picked out 4 senses of cause, okay? And I want to talk about this because I want to show how these senses of cause are answered. If I just say, well, what causes that? That's a kind of vague question because whether you realize it or not at first, there are many ways to interpret what you mean by caused it. Like who caused it? What was the catalyst that made it happen? Or what's the process that it's following? Or what is the end of this process that's causing it to happen? So there's a lot of things. So let's go over Aristotle's. And Aristotle's not the whole topic, beginning and end of the discussion of causation, but every philosopher begins pretty much with Aristotle from, I think it's from the physics, or maybe from the metaphysics by Aristotle. Anyway, Aristotle has 4 kinds of cause. And only one of these senses of cause is what we today mean by cause. A normal English-speaking person on the street, and if you ask them, this is what we now mean by cause. But so these will sound a little strange and unfamiliar, but I'm going to tell them. And these are, where did I write them? I come up upon this problem again and again and again and again and again. Unbelievable. Yeah. Okay, I'll just have to do it from memory. The first is the material cause. And that's the question of what something is made of. So if there's a brick house or a cement, let's say a cement house, its material cause is cement. So we don't normally refer to the cement, the material something's made of, as its cause, but he did. That was one of the causes of it. It was necessary to know what it was made of to be able to answer how it was caused, or what its full sense of cause was. And another one was, may not do these in order, but formal. So if I'm making a chair, part of its cause is that it's a chair, and it has that function that a chair has, and that's its formal cause. We don't think like that today. And anyway, another one is what he called its efficient cause. Okay. Now this is the one that's the most like we say today when we say what's the cause of that? What caused the car to crash or something like that? Now for Aristotle, interestingly, the efficient cause, the thing that made it happen, is always a thing or a person. So the cause of a child is a parent, all right? Now, today, we would say, no, there's a process, and it's called gestation, and it goes on inside the mother's womb, and it begins with fertilization, and you go through that whole process 9 months long, and then she has a baby, and that's the cause of a person. But he would say it has to be a parent. As a matter of fact, there was another sense in which he believed that the semen was the cause of creating a baby, and that the semen came, so a man was entirely responsible for the creation of a baby, not a woman. And the semen would go inside the woman where all the materials were there. So there's its material cause, and it would sort of build a person like a carpenter builds a house out of wood. Funny, but that's what he thought of as an efficient cause. The sperm, okay, was the cause. And then this final one was called the final cause. And the final cause, we don't normally think of a final cause, but it really lost a lot of important notes. I might have to start this whole thing over. I feel bad about it. But anyway, on the final cause, it's its end. Oh, yeah, here we go. What's pulling this thing along to occur is its end, or the object, or the goal, and this is called a teleological consideration. What is the intention? Okay, so we'll add the word intention here. All right. All right. Now, this is an important concept because today there's this big argument about intelligent design. And, in materialism, the world formed because of the Big Bang, which was just a freak accident, and evolution was just a series of freak accidents. And there's no intention. That's really bug scientists. And they say it's just accidents and coincidences that created the world, and natural selection, and that sort of logical, the natural selection thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll come back to that. But anyway, those are the four senses of cause. So now, when I talk about cause of a universe being the result of a psychogenic process, that means it has a psychological origin, because remember, infinite intelligence isn't a thing. It's not physical. It produces the things that we find in the world that we call physical, or the appearance of them. This is our process. Okay. Now, first of all, our efficient cause of the world forming is a process, okay? And it's a psychogenic process, as I just explained what that means. And that means it has a psychological origin. And so it's very different than a physical cosmology. Now, for Baba, we have a first cause. By the way, I never noticed that Aristotle didn't have a first cause. Well, a lot of people, Christians especially, they talk about the first cause. God, in the beginning was God, and God had the word, or the other one is God, had the desire to create heaven and earth. So that would be a first cause. God is sort of the original unmoved mover, you can say, or the uncaused cause. And but Aristotle didn't think that was logical. How can you have an unmoved, original unmoved mover? So he just felt the world had always existed. There is no cause, first cause. And so it just sort of goes on like a motor, especially the orbits of the planets and so on. It's just like a big machine that goes, and it doesn't ever. It's kind of beautiful, but it doesn't have a start. It didn't get turned on, but Baba does. And this, being psychogenic, is going to be sort of psychological cause. The infinite intelligence, remember, originally is dormant, or you could say asleep. Analogously, well, actually, kind of literally, because that's what it is, psychological. We can use words like that. Sleep. Baba refers to it in a sound sleep state, So, but in the beginning, what woke this infinite intelligence and began this process was an urge, or what he called a whim. And it was the original whim to know who he was, his identity. So God initially desired to know himself. Now, what caused this? Nothing caused this, and Baba talks about that. That's the sense in which it's a whim. A whim is whimsicality is colored by the fact that it has no reason for happening. It just was a whim. And but since this first cause caused everything else in sequence to happen, everything else does have a cause. So this is the only act that ever happened, even though it's a psychological act, realize, not a physical one. This is the only act that has no cause. But I have thought of a reason that it happened myself. Baba didn't write this, I'm just saying it. If we think of this original state as infinite intelligence, and there's nothing else, what is the nature of intelligence? Wouldn't the nature of intelligence be to want to know, whatever there is to know? I mean, that when you meet an intelligent person, don't you find that they want to know things? They seek knowledge. And so I would say that the reason this happened, partly at least, is that it was in its nature to eventually want to know. Okay? Then you have the psychological process, which is all these lenses. And I'm going to say why they arouse in this order and all. But there is a sense of a final cause or intention here. Remember that the intention ultimately is for God, for the infinite intelligence or God, to know who he is. Because he awakens, then he doesn't. And so he has to go through this process of dreaming up space and time and the physical reality and taking itself to be all these creatures in evolution and then all these human beings in the course of reincarnation to finally have an epiphany. Oh, I know, I am God, let's put a light bulb here, That is Baba's teaching, see? But for this to happen, it's necessary that there be a human being with a mind and a brain and intelligence so that it can express the intelligence of the original intelligence and to discover his identity. You can't just do it like, let's say there's a comet. Well, comet can't realize it's God, and here there's a mouse. Well, a mouse is not smart enough to figure out that it's God. And this isn't even a figuring out. This is a real realization, which Baba talks about. But it's only possible, Baba says, in a human form. So human form had to be achieved. Full consciousness in the human form. So to become a fully conscious human being, that is the final cause is to have the experience of I am God. Who am I? I am God. Here's the question. Who am I? Here's the answer. I am God. And that finishes the theme. That's Baba's theme and purpose of creation in his book, God Speaks. It's the theme and purpose of creation. So there you have it. That's it, essentially. But how did he know to do this, and then this, and then this, as I was going before? Well, that's a bigger topic, and I'm going to talk about that. I want to talk about that now. But before I do, let's go ahead. All right. So I feel very clumsy today. I didn't even think I felt well enough to do this, but I'm trying, and maybe I'll redo it. I always say I'm going to redo these. I never do. Because I watch them to edit them, and I go, oh, it's good enough. I mean, nobody's paying me to do this. So, all right. I'm going to talk about how it has that order. I've already sort of explained it before, but I'm going to go over it again. Now, first of all, this process, if we take the entire process from the beginning, from the original whim to know, to I am God state realization, which is the goal, let's say. There are 3 stages, really. And Baba, we add more in God Speaks. But in my evolution of perception, which is really, I'm only describing the formation of a conscious human being on a planet, in a universe. I'm not trying to explain all the spiritual stuff that Baba goes into after that, which he calls involution, which you got to read his material for that, because I don't know anything about that. I'm telling you this conception, which was my own over the last 20-something years. So the first one I call inorganic. This is an inorganic evolution. Something missing from Darwinism. You ever notice that Darwin's thing kind of begins with life forms? But, there was also the formation of all the stone forms and gaseous forms and, all the planets that before there was life. But this explains this here. And then there is organic evolution, and that is like Darwin, what Darwin was trying to solve, which is how did all the life forms evolve? And they sort of go in a sequence from the simplest ones, like just amoebas, all the way up to a conscious human being, over here. Here's a person, I don't know. So that's organic evolution. And then there is cultural. And that's where we form our, our myths and mores that form a culture. And also all our ideas, okay? Sort of the conceptual world of individual people. But in communities and in a civilization, they share them. Like I talked about the thing of the Greeks sharing the idea of Hercules. They're all impressed by Hercules, but they didn't all come up with Hercules, but they all were taught it in their education. And so they kind of have this shared lens about Hercules. And that's cultural. And by the way, culture is a great word, and culture exists not just in like countries, but there are psychologists that refer to a culture even in a family, or a community. But even just like a small nuclear family, you get to know those people, and there's kind of a culture here. So that's what I mean. All those concepts that form that world, that's a cultural world. That's sort of like a layer on top of organic, which is a layer on top of inorganic, of rocks and atoms and so forth. So this evolution is pretty simple straightforward to show. We start again with our one person online. He commented he thought I'm talking about eyesight. My mother thought I was talking about eyesight because I often will say the word see. But you mean it in the broad sense. Like, I see the meaning of what you're describing. I don't mean eyesight. And eyesight is not very important in the evolution of perception. But I use an eye because it's kind of traditional to just mean perception generally, which means the taking of any kind of experience. It doesn't even have to be, so it could be sound, smell, taste. Those are the sense, that's sense experience, but also experience of thoughts, experience of memories, experience of dreams, experience of hallucinations, even spiritual experiences. Those are all perceived. So, and then there's the ways of perceiving, as I said last time. And here we have time, then space, then we have the natural laws, which are they're ratios of time and space. And they form the inorganic world. And you start with just time. By the end, you end up with a whole universe with, galaxies going around each other and everything. Okay? But then the evolution continues as this one perception begins to experience itself very slowly as separate from itself. So separate from all others that emerge in this process. Well, remember I said that organs like nerves and stuff evolve. Initially insects have antennas and some are blind and, it's very primitive. But it gradually gets more and more sophisticated, its organs of perception, its brain, its nervous system. It starts out with just a little bit of cilia sitting out there, picking up, sensations to react to. And then you get to the human, and boy, are we sensitive. We not only have the five senses, we lose some of our sensitivity in smell and hearing, maybe from like wolves, but we gain, intense ability to perceive what's there, including the number of objects and the number of its parts, and then finally the number of parts of the atoms that make it up, entirely through this ability to perceive our cognitions about our sense qualities that we take. So we are really sensitive. But anyway, this organic evolution is a series of forms from like I just said, like a one-celled amoeba, say, or a plant, and then gradually, more and more, it's like a butterfly, I don't know, and then you have like some little animals scurrying around, and each one has more sensitivity. And evolution does have a pattern. Some people say there is no forward in evolution. The other is, everything's gaining consciousness in the fossil record. It's a record of media for experiencing. And then you finally have monkeys, as I'm supposed to have this like fist on the ground, and he's, I don't know. And then eventually, sort of like a missing link, leaning over with his bat. I don't know. It's terrible drawings. But you get what I'm trying to do? One of those evolution pictures of all the forms of evolution. Now, in materialistic evolution, these are all just totally random accidents. There's no reason why this comes after this after this. But we're going to find out that in Baba, these have a very special reason, and it's consistent with the whole process. So let's keep going now. And once you're human and a full human being, I don't know how am I going to draw that. Let's give him a tie and I don't know. He's got a suit. Oh, this is supposed to be a person who's really sophisticated and thinking and everything. And he's got a pair of glasses on. And anyway, and he begins to think like this, and then his other friends are also doing that, and so he sort of shares those. They're sort of transpersonal lenses, and in a culture you share them, but you all share them individually. You all have them individually back. A lot of the earlier stuff is just, there aren't really individuals. There's just, the one hasn't really split itself off yet. So, and also the human being more than any other species finds itself separate from everything else, to the point where he even has a sense of ego. He has a real egocentric idea of himself as, I'm me, not that, Whereas further back, you have a sort of sense of community, and like in ants, they practically are the anthill. But in humans, we're really separated off, okay? So these are these 3 stages of one long evolution. And it's all psychogenic. All right. Now, I wanted to point out some differences between this and both the Christian idea of creation in 6 days, the Genesis, and also the difference between this and materialistic evolution, like Darwin. Okay, let's start with comparing this to the Genesis. So in Genesis, which is not just Christian, it's Jewish. I think they have the idea in Islam. It's in the Old Testament. And God is there in the beginning. And he has this idea, for some reason no one knows why. He was going to create this world. He's going to create with people in it, eventually, animals. And he has a design. And he thinks of a design, and then he makes the world. That doesn't happen here. Anybody who says, oh, this is an intelligent design theory, it's infinite intelligence and has the word intelligence in it, but it's not infinite intelligence. It's not intelligent design, because there's no design here, okay? Because this is too semi-conscious to design something, and to project onto it the kind of thinking that people have, that like architects have when they design something. Well, I've already talked a lot about that in part 20. That's called the historical fallacy. It's projecting back into the beginning of a process something that only comes about at the end result of the process. You're taking this guy and you're putting him back here. Well, that's a fallacy. It's also a logical anachronism. It's impossible. The conditions weren't there back then for an architect, okay? So we would deny that that's possible. But the general feeling of it is still there, because you still sort of have a creator, you sort of have a person that's dreaming up the world, like a designer, but he's not doing it the way a guy does it with a compass and so forth, like they have in like masonry and so forth. That idea of God as the architect. Instead, this is God has a whim. Originally, God is ignorant, and this whim is to know itself as God. Remember that light bulb we had on the other chart. Okay? It's to get there. He wants, who am I? The answer will be, I am God. But he has to achieve this full consciousness. And that requires the human form to have full consciousness because of all our wiring and everything, and all our acquired experience that makes us fully conscious. And that's described in his book, how you attain full consciousness over this process. But so what makes it this one and this one and this one and this one and this one? Logic. It's all logical, because when this is let's say this is the final cause, this is the end, the goal, what you're trying to achieve, there's a necessary condition to get to that. And this is the necessary condition for it, and this is the necessary condition for it, and so forth back all the way to the beginning. And the original necessary condition is you have to have an original urge to know. So when I said this in the previous one, let's say this right here is gravity. Gravity is a ratio between time and space that governs things when dropped. But in order to have a ratio of time and space, you have to have space and time. So while a physical world, one of the conditions is gravity, or otherwise everything will just fall apart and float away. One of the conditions for gravity is space, and one of the conditions for space is time, because it had to have happened at some point in time. So you have a logical reason. Now, that's really interesting, because you don't need anybody designing, because it's going to be this way. However, there's another thing that'll come up that seems kind of strange. That means that this end is kind of determining everything back here. It seems strange when we talk about something in the future, at the end of a process, determining the process. However, isn't that kind of contradict something? How can the future be the cause of the past? Well, remember that the first law, the first schema, is time. The infinite intelligence is not in time. So when this occurred, this question, who am I? Simultaneously, it had the answer, because it was infinitely intelligent. There's only one answer to who am I when the infinite intelligence asks it. And what is that only possible answer? The infinite intelligence. He's going to realize that he's the infinite intelligence, but he knows it instantly. So by the time he's asked it, he's answered it. So all this sort of happened already, all at once. Baba even said that. He said all this already happened. Or another way he says, because there is no time, it never happened at all. But these are some of the kind of cryptic, strange things of mysticism, of Baba's mysticism. I mean, I've never heard this stuff before, except him. Now I want to say something else about these forms and evolution. From the first grub to the most almost human Australopithecus, sort of man-ape, right before human, about 3 million years ago. What do we see here? How is this happening? How are these shows? Well, Baba, see, in evolution by Darwin and the materialists, everything's an accident. There's nothing but accidents. There's natural selection. When they say natural, that means accident. It had no design. It has no reason, and no logical reason either. So that's a problem, actually. But here, Baba takes to explain this, he takes a doll, like a rag doll, and he wraps it all up like this, and then he unfolds it and says, "This is evolution." The man form is already latent at the very beginning, and so all the forms are trying to express the human form, and there are reasons to believe that. Baba gives a lot of examples. Like, for instance, if you take a plant, here's its roots, here's its stalk, and here's its reaching up here with flowers, and these are flowers on this. Let's just say take this plant. So just not any particular one. Here's the sexual organs, and here's the arms reaching down into the earth for sustenance. to put in its mouth and to feed it, and then its sex organs are hanging out in the air. Well, you just turn that upside down, and you have that Da Vinci picture of, the ideal human being, where the sex organs are down here, and the arms are reaching here, and the mouth is here, and the mind is up here. Now, this is just turning over, and Baba literally says that's what evolution is doing. It's like a flipping over of form, and that before the plant's all curled up in a stone. Now, a scientist goes, well, this is just crazy, but he's telling you how this happened. He's not talking about how it was inferred by inference from observation of the effect. He's telling what the actual experience of the creation process was. It was where it was already known what the answer was, and it was wrapped up and just had to unfold. And so all this is necessary. It's not accident. It's not a series of freak coincidences. It is the unfolding of a logical process. I had some final notes here. So in a psychogenic universe, a psychological process replaces a physical process. And that's why this looks so different. And in a psychogenic universe, psychological forces replace physical forces that are causing the thing. So this is going to look this would naturally look different than we're used to. And, but I wanted to end with a quote by Meher Baba. Remember, in materialism, the process is directionless, goalless, and its end, us, is the result. People is the result of just countless coincidences. It sort of buggers belief. There are scientists I could link to in the show notes, maybe I will, to a video, where they talk about the probabilities of evolution having occurred like it did. It's not possible. By the way, this process, as strange as it looks, because I'm a weird artist, is more consistent with the fossil record than either, Genesis, where the adds with 6-day, creation, or the series of accidents found in Darwin's theory. So it's more consistent with the actual facts of science. The fossil record conforms better to this than it does, especially this and this. They don't even have anything for this. They just, I don't know. In the beginning, there was nothing, and then it exploded. There you go. See, I answered it. That's all they've got. But this evolution, unlike the one of accidents, is guided by the logic of necessary conditions in a sequence. And materialistic evolution is just luck. But there's another problem with materialism's account of creation. Let me see what I said. Let's just lay this out. I'm going to show the problem. And then I'll give how Baba would answer it. Okay, the problem is, let's start with the Big Bang. Okay, let's take the materialist conception of how we got from the beginning of things forming to our civilization. Here's a city, New York or something, and we're walking around there in art museums and having wars, and we have a culture and a mind and all that. So here's the Big Bang, and then materialism, and then gradually things have formed, novas and everything, and they formed into planets, and they circled suns, and they had moons, and all this, and you have the universe. Okay, that's physical. And then let's take one planet, and on that planet, originally it's hot, and then because maybe it was even gaseous, and then it cools and it becomes hard, and if it's liquid, it's becomes solid, and it eventually breaks into continents and oceans, and then you have creatures on there, and you have let's start with a grub, and then there we get to a giraffe, and we get to finally people. Oh boy, did I do this grunny. I'm trying to make a point. I'm not trying to be an artist. In this process, from the Big Bang to the big city, where does perception begin? Conscious perception. And I don't want to say consciousness. That's too abstract. I mean, when did people perceive and weren't just thermostats? Like, this might have almost been like a thermostat, but at some point things start to really see what they perceive. Okay, like a human being doesn't just move funny when it gets hot. He really feels it's hot, and he sees that it's hot. He realizes it's hot. He is fully conscious. That's what I mean. When you see something, you're conscious, and you see the whole dynamic of it. You don't just react to it like in behaviorism. When materialists just want to make this all like a big machine. But any honest person will say, well, people at least have consciousness. Let's just put a big glow thing. Now, at what point do you point to where that began? And what caused it? Okay, they don't know where it began. They don't even know what we're talking about. They tried to deny it happened because they don't have any answer to any of these. Where do you draw where consciousness came in? Where perception started happening? Now, if they want to say, well, there is no perception, or something like that, they got a problem. Because science, unlike a lot of things, is based on perception. That's why it's empirical. That means based on observation. Where did they find these natural laws that science so brilliantly teased out? What did it tease it out of? It teased it out of its experience. So science does nothing but solves all the great mysteries by sitting down and meditating on its conscious experience of the world. It's not gravity isn't a law of some unexperienced dimension that we don't perceive. No, it's a law of the world we perceive. So if you want to separate science from perception, good luck. You can't do it. It doesn't even have a beginning. It begins in perception and it ends in perception. Science is essentially the art of perceiving and thinking about it and determining what the laws are behind it, including psychological science, the social sciences. They also perceive the behavior of people, look for the patterns, which are laws of cultural, human action, and then they're able to make predictions and so forth. The same thing all the way through. It's a perceptual game. That's all it is. That's what science is. Remove that, you have nothing. Even if science was just sitting around fantasizing, it has to be able to perceive what it's fantasizing, to be able to convey to you what it fantasized. So I'm not saying it perceived real things or not real things. It's just that it can't escape the fact that science cannot escape the fact that it is just nothing but perception. So at what point did perception start? Where? You have to answer it. Otherwise, the whole basis of science is gone. Science wants to sort of get away from this question. But when we come back to our process, our crazy process, if you want, let's come back to our original one from the other day. You don't have to find where in the process consciousness came into it, because the whole thing is consciousness. All right? This was the beginning of consciousness, and here we are fully conscious, and this is conscious experience, and that was semi-conscious. Okay, it was less conscious because this is an evolution of getting more conscious. But it's all psychogenic. Okay? So you don't have to go, well, it was here, or it was here. The whole thing is. So that problem is gone. And so because of that, I'm going to end with this quote by Baba. I say, how did perception begin? This is me. I didn't. The universe is a result of an evolution of perception. We live in a psychogenic universe. Baba said, it's in God Speaks, in the introduction of the second edition. It is well to remember always that the beginning is a beginning in consciousness. The evolution is an evolution in consciousness. And the end, if there be an end, is an end in consciousness. Meher Baba. And also, from this, you get what Baba means when he says God is all that is. Because all there is God. The rest of this is nothing but God's imaginations. It doesn't really even exist in the substantive sense. But it exists in the apparent sense. Things are as they appear. But that's because we are God in this dream. But we are all the one dreamer. And one day, in each one of us, that dreamer wakes. And that's called God realization. And that is the theme of Baba's creation. And that is all I have to say today. I knew this was going to be very hard to go through. I don't want to have to do it again, so I just prayed that this worked out okay. I'm going to go edit it. I don't want to have to do it again. I really, really, really don't. But thank you for following this. I'm not. I have some thoughts about what Part 22 will be about, but right now I'm not sure. But because I have a lot of things that I could do next. But thank you for coming along on this journey with me of what Meher Baba really taught. Thank you very much.